Thanks everybody for joining. We've got a great crowd today. I'm really excited about this first session where we're going to talk about the multi-sensory store. It's an update on a session we did earlier this year. So it's going to be interesting to compare and contrast what the panelists are going to talk about. So I'm going to hand over straight to Howard to introduce the session. But thanks everybody for turning up.
Thank you very much, Piers. So it was an absolutely amazing time. We met in January with the incredible panelists we've got on today's discussion. And little did we know that a few months after talking about engaging with the senses, being all touchy-feely, there were loads of hugs and kisses going on. There were parties, there were store tours that Piers and his team organized. So we all got, I mean, every gamut of our senses was tantalized and looked after in January. And little did we know that just a few months afterwards, we would be meeting in these circumstances where we're facing a little bit more of a challenge to our senses with isolation, social distancing. As we speak today, a quarter of the world's population is actually isolated on lockdown. So that's nearly 2 billion people. And so it'll be really interesting today to talk about where we're at now, how things have changed in the months that have passed since January, but not only just dwelling on the moment we're in now, thinking of the really interesting impact that's going to have on retail design and the senses during and after this outbreak, and not only just the kind of short long term, but also the long term view. So I have a presentation which I'm going to share, which will be a great way of introducing our fantastic panel. So I will share my screen. And I will, sorry, there's London traffic in the background. Bear with me. And can you see my screen now?
Yes.
We are going to have to deal with sensory overload here because dialing in from London, you will get ambulances, lorries and things going past. So very quick introduction to myself. The reason why Piers on lots of work with Piers, we're an agency looking at forging human connection, real and digital space. Some of our case studies here show work we've done with Louis Vuitton and Piers, a future of loyalty. A humming hub on the left-hand side bottom is a golden beehive to launch a charm for Pandora in Australia, where you could smell meadows, you could hear the sound of bees. And ultimately the idea is that with human connection and the senses being stimulated, you form deeper memories and more meaningful memories. So the next slide is the lovely Lauren.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lauren McGuire. I'm the president of Man-Made Music. We are a global sonic studio, born in entertainment. So we've been doing television for a long time. But over the last 20 years we've been in business, we've evolved to deal with everything from retail locations to theme parks to the robots that live in your home and will be driving you around in the future.
Thank you very much. And now to Martin Arrutia. Have I pronounced that correctly?
That is correct, Howard. Hi, everyone. I'm Martin from Lego, representing and headed up our retail innovation team. This is a fantastic picture because it talks about the nostalgia, right? And something that we will like to see soon. But definitely, we are in charge of, my team is in charge of developing all of those new and memorable experiences that people will have when they come to a Lego store. It will be from playing with a set all the way to creating your own personalized product. So excited to see how we are evolving and looking forward to have a good conversation with you all.
Some lovely visuals there. I was looking at the presentation earlier thinking it almost feels a bit pornographic when you look at like images with people and people touching things. It's quite a strange idea now to be collecting it in a physical space at this time.
Definitely,
so,
and
I'll speak people there having fun, and
I'll speak more about that in a little bit because definitely we have evolved our thoughts and we are more conscious about the situation. So actually there is updates to these slides that we're already thinking and working on. So more to come during our conversation. But of course, stores are at the heart of what we do, right? The Lego bricks are multi-sensorial to brick, build, and then even to create the sound and the creativity behind.
Great stuff. And then over to Sarah.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Sarah Schiller, co-founder of Sloomoo Institute. We opened our first immersive experience all around slime in October of last year. And 90,000 people had come through our space to not only play with slime, but also be focused on everything, what we call everything hashtag satisfying. So ASMR, sounds, scent, and obviously getting their hands sticky and slimy. So the world has certainly changed for us as we look forward to both what we're doing today and how we plan to reactivate the space when things start to come back to normal.
Great stuff. So thank you for your introductions, everyone. I think, as you can see, we have a panel that couldn't be broader and more interesting in terms of stimulating sound, touch, play, and working out how people connect in real time. And there's obviously challenges afoot now, and we've had a couple of chats us lot together about what the impact of those things would be. But and I think you've probably covered the first question in your introduction in terms of what you love about your job and what brought you there. But what would be the most interesting question I'd love to ask, and I'm sure the audience is really keen to know too, is what has happened and how has the focus shifted in the last few months for you? So Sarah, how about you? How have things changed and what are you doing?
Yeah, so after the very difficult time that we went through to shut down our experience, we started to focus on our e-commerce. And what's been so incredible about the last 2 or 3 weeks is that our e-commerce sales almost quadrupled. We've seen 2 different avenues take place. I spoke to a mom yesterday who said she bought 6 slimes from us because her kids are now spending 8 hours in front of a screen all day and they need something to do with their hands. So it's helping families deal with screen time. We used to say, come play with slime and get off the screens and get away from technology. Now it's actually helping people get through technology. We're also seeing another really interesting trend emerge, which is corporations are asking us to send out to their entire staff custom-made slime so that their staff can feel connected to the company and tap into the mental health benefits of playing with slime.
I read an interesting article over the weekend with Katie Lear, who I think you've collaborated with, but she's doing slime therapy and talking about the benefits of slime playing to dealing with trauma. And so there was something interesting that I read that was saying that if you play with slime and if you're engaged with that, because so many of your senses are stimulated in that moment, your brain can't actually process things like grief and trauma so harshly at the same time. So for all of us, I think slime at the moment, it feels like it's actually got a great place because people are dealing with so much untactile lifestyle, Zoom chats, no touchy-feely stuff, no human contact. And we're not so in the physical. So I can imagine that would really resonate with your audience. And I'm sure your slime products will be, we must share some links to people at the end actually, because it would be really good for anyone out there who does need a little bit of stimulation and well-being. When we met in January, you handed slime out to the audience and we were all quite, I mean, everyone was in that moment. You really are in the moment, aren't you? And you're like playing and yeah.
I think the one amazing thing that most adults remember slime from their childhood, but when they re-engage with it, they remember how good it feels, how wonderful it smells. We work with our chief slimologist is Scented Slime by Amy, so all of our slimes have these amazing scents, and then it does keep your hands busy while perhaps you're doing something like. I know people are on 8 to 10 hours of Zoom calls a day. So yeah. It's found an interesting home that I think we knew would happen, but we didn't think would happen quite so quickly. So the world turning upside down has now actually given people, I think, to start to experience something that they may not have experienced if they had to wait until they came into our store.
Amazing. And Lauren, this ties in nicely with when we were talking before. There's such an array of products that you've been working on in terms of you are creating the sounds of the future, you're creating the sounds of medical health, you're creating the sounds of banking and purchasing. How has your focus evolved and changed since January when we last spoke? And is there anything specifically that's changed?
I would say that for the last 2 weeks, we've been in support mode. So all of the messaging, the underscores, the music that you created before this time feel a little bit off right now for a lot of our brands. So it was really quick. Oh, all of those hip hop tracks we did, we can't use them. How do we shift messaging? How do we shift marketing? How do we provide music that creates an underscore of empathy and understanding and positivity? So we've been correcting a lot of things recently, quick turn messages that have to go out and need to strike the right tone for where we live right now. And then the next step is future proofing. So for our financial institutions, for our large retailers, what is this going to mean for the next 6 months? The projects that we had thought we were going to do, is that really where the focus is going to be, or is it going to have to shift? And we've been talking a lot about employee support for those big retailers who have to remain open, and hospital workers are the first line, and the EMTs and fire departments and the PD are second line. These grocers and retail workers are third line. They still have to be going to work and interacting with a lot of people. So how do we support them?
Amazing stuff. And have you found, I think there's been quite a lot of fast, rapid paced change, and people are getting used to working at home, and it is described as the world's biggest working from home experiment the last few weeks. But sound is a really, really interesting element, isn't it? Because it can really soothe the mind. I read a statistic that was saying that a positive sound, whilst associated with any activity whatsoever, can increase your enjoyment or engagement by up to 30%. Your memory and your happiness connected with it just through the sounds that you're listening to.
Yeah, we've had a lot of interesting discussion with clients and folks we happen to be interacting with. We were working on a nature installation for a downtown area that was outside, but it has no natural wildlife. And so we were creating wildlife sounds to pump into that space because it was going to have a lot of green and it should sound like it has wildlife living there. We've been using that and sending it to people to say, if you need a break, play this, especially if you can't open the windows. The weather's been all over the place here in New York. And those days when you open the windows, the fresh air and just the sound of outside really creates a different sense of this all and affects that feeling of isolation. So we've been using that with clients, especially for our clients up in the north that can't open their windows yet. I've been like, here's some birds. Play this for a little bit at low volumes, and I think it'll help your tone and mood. The playlists that have been going around have been great. I think a lot of people are doing it. Artists are really jumping in to provide a little bit of that therapy during this time. So as much as the music community is struggling, it's been great to see how some people are using this to activate and reach out to audiences and fans.
Amazing stuff. How about you, Martin? So what's shifted in the world of Lego, and have you seen any adaptation or people using Lego in different ways?
It has changed a lot. I think, personally, of course, learning to have meetings with my kids. In the past, I was hiding them, behind the door. Now everybody's open to have them running and screaming. So there's a lot. From a company perspective, we are learning a lot all the way on how could we, continue to be engaged. But also we are hearing a lot of feedback from our customers on how they're using Lego to be more creative, to use this time to keep learning and playful and doing these different things. So it's been a very interesting time. From if I bring this to a retail perspective and to a retail innovation perspective, it has changed our focus. Definitely, it has changed some of the things that we do. So maybe I'm trying to put into practice my Zoom skills. Let me just share with you 2 or 3 pictures on what is changing for us and what is happening in our side of the world. So hopefully you can see my screen very, very soon. Is that showing? Perfect. So, when we come to the stores, to retail, these are some of the things that we're bringing to life. We have a place for people to be creative. We come and, have master classes where kids will come and adults as well come and learn how to program, their robots and build better. We have lighting, moods. Actually, the question has come to us on how do we translate this to a .com environment, to a digital environment. And in the past, of course, we had a focus on that channel. We actually did our homework, and we are keeping our Lego.com shop open and fortunately having some fans coming and ordering products. But as an experience, the biggest change that we are having is how do we actually create the next version of this that will work not only in our physical stores, but also happen online. In the past, we have never prioritized that. Right now, we're looking into a couple of things. First of all, how do we make shopping online a little bit more sensorial or experiential? And we have a few surprises hopefully coming in the next weeks. And so stay tuned for that. But definitely we're exploring on that. We can't deny that, you know, after this, there's going to be some adjustments on how people shop, what people do. So that's the first part. Definitely, I personally have the hope that when this ends, people will come more positive to the shops and will be actually more sensitive to what we're doing. But the other biggest change that has happened is how do we have our teams working in the front line? In our stores, the store associates are always in the front, right? They're great brand ambassadors who are helping our shoppers to find the answers and get inspiration. We actually now are playing with a new add-on to our team, our customer service department. I mean, the same way as our store teams have been always engaged on the front, we always have had our customer service teams working very close and together. Right now, actually, they're taking the forefront of the contact with our shoppers. They are the ones answering questions about products. They are the ones actually answering calls when you have parents asking for an idea on how to play. So these new times are helping us to think about how do we get out of our, you know, our frames and think beyond the standards, but also how other parts of the organization actually are becoming our best allies or friends as we are now contacting our shoppers online or on the phone. So that's what is happening in our world, but definitely looking forward to go back to the good times, to the normal times.
So going back to the good times is a great place for us to spin into the next question. So to flip that back again, if I start with you again, Martin, but anyone feel free to chip in, how will we see this changing retail? I mean, you've touched on some really interesting points there around things like your brand ambassadors in the stores, giving people information they need. I think there's going to be more issues around hygiene, about distance, about touch, which will change and evolve. There's maybe a short-term and a longer-term issue around that. But how do you think, people have talked a lot about brands really seeing this as a bit of a shakeout of which brands really truly need to be physical and which brands can survive as e-commerce. I'm a big believer in physical retail. I think it's an amazing way to engage people. It's not just even about shopping. We've done it since time began. We love markets. We love smelling flowers. We love seeing our friends and looking at things, even if we're not going to buy, if we're window shopping. But how do you think it will impact on the role of the physical store once we've come out of the moment we're in now?
Yes, I think definitely there's going to be some changes, right? I personally believe that the other side is going to be good for physical retail as well. It's going to continue to be there. I use this as an example as when you are, you know, sleeping and you wake up and see the sun shining, you get more sensitive. You hear the birds, you see, you know, the light in a different way as, you know, in the afternoon when you've been exposed to that all day long. I do believe that retail is going to get a new shine, a new light. So people are going to be more sensitive to everything. However, we need to consider everything, and the questions that I'm reading here are great. We need to consider how do we keep the distance. I mean, that's going to stay for a long time. How do we foster in hygiene? How do we actually manage, you know, how many people come into the stores? That's something that every retailer and even every shopper is going to have in their minds. So that is the operational part that we are also working on parallel and thinking of. But I do believe there is a lot of, you know, we will be eager to go out and visit with maybe different eyes the things once we go back to the normal.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think that people definitely want to engage. I think people are going to bounce back and actually really want to touch and smell, feel, hear, but they're going to want to do it safely. And I know for us, we had already put into place a lot of cleanliness measures just because the idea of a slime shop, you know, you think about that a lot before you open, and we had a lot of sort of safety measures in place. But we are going to have to think through even more. We were lucky we've antibacterial and other pieces to it to make it cleaner to start. But we're going to have to think through the actual experience. And I think we'll be able to adjust it in a way that folks know if they have to watch, they're going to be okay with it. It's going to be part of the experience. And will just become an accepted routine as they then move through the rest of the experience. It will make everyone feel better. It will give a peace of mind. But I do think people are going to want to come back. They're going to touch, feel, see each other. One of the things that we miss the most is seeing people all playing together, smiling, and we got to get back to those days.
Right.
We're definitely going to enjoy the comeback, aren't we? I think everyone's going to lose their minds with excitement. So, Lauren, how about you? As well as the future store, I thought another little add-on to the question for you is something Martin raised about, can we make a more sensory online experience as well? So we're almost connecting those experiences out of isolation.
So 2 parts, and I getting this question a lot of people. What are people going to want to hear differently when they walk into stores? Are they going to want it to be calmer? Are they going to be looking for the energy? And as music and sound people, we've always, for the last 6 years, we've only worked in testing that had a subconscious piece of it. If you ask people what they want to hear, it's actually usually not what they actually want to hear. And our job is to create an amazing environment. You don't want somebody to walk into a retail location and say, the music in there was amazing. You want them to walk out and say, that experience was amazing. I felt amazing when I was in there. So we're going to be looking at subconsciously testing. There's such a spectrum that people could go back with in terms of sound. Maybe you don't have music, you just have ambient sound, the sounds of children laughing. We have an intuitive response to these sort of things. Maybe you create sounds of humans interacting gently but positively. So we're going to have to test those things to understand what is the mindset that people are going to come back in and how are they going to best respond. The e-commerce question is always really tricky. We're in a place where people want to say, how do we create an environment in e-commerce? Most of the time, we don't recommend sound on the website if people aren't expecting it, because generally people are at work, they went to buy something online and the sound comes up and nobody wants that. That's not what they're looking for. You always need the opportunity in e-commerce for people to opt out. Where I've seen buying environments really work is where you expect sound. So on, let's say your streaming area where you can buy movies, as you're sitting at home, people expect that to have an environment and a sound environment, and we can play in that space. So I think it depends on what sort of e-commerce site that you have. Do people expect to be a place where they are going to play, or do they expect it to be a place where they're going to make a transaction? And to remember to always choose carefully on websites. Apps, it's another place where you have all the permission to play, because mobile, they turn off their sound if they don't want to hear it.
I suppose you've answered something that is innate to people, where if you're in an environment, you're processing so many of your senses at one time. In a physical environment, there was a talk by Ivy Ross as part of Dutch Design Week in Eindhoven. No, it wasn't Dutch Design Week, sorry, it was part of the Frame Awards earlier this year in Amsterdam. She works at Google, and she was talking a lot about how we use 90% of our brain is unconsciously processing, and we're only actually making decisions with 10% of our brain. So in a website, it's very, very overt. Something like sound is a very clear add-on, whereas in a physical space, I suppose you have to layer lots of things to draw people into that moment and get their focus. But as you're saying, Lauren, it could be really overwhelming, and websites that make noises tend to freak people out, don't they? Because you're just not expecting it. And at work, we all know the effect of someone being on a computer. Suddenly there's like mega loud soundtrack going on.
Yeah, as the garbage truck goes by my front door, I don't know if this is going to change that, that people are going to be like, oh, now I welcome all of this sound in a website. But again, I think it's that if you're in an environment where people are expecting it, they would be open to it.
There are a few really good questions coming in from the audience. So I thought I'd ask one of them that's come up, which is from Judith to all panelists. And that is, I know this may be a weird question, but can the panelists share how they see the new normal and what that might be? So we've kind of touched on that a bit. The new normal, I suppose that's probably following on from what we were saying earlier about changes in attitudes and expectations, but around things like community as well, connecting back with community. That's something that, having been distanced from each other, being back together in community and spaces, our senses will have a lot to kind of take in. Any thoughts on the new normal from anyone?
I I can tell you that I don't have the answers in terms of sound in retail spaces. I think it'll be interesting. I think we're going to have to do some testing to understand what people are looking for. And I think that's going to shift 6 months later. I think what is interesting about the new normal, I hear it over and over, is just the overwhelm of tech and screen right now. I wonder if this is going to push us back. You know, we were doing a lot of sonifying screens in retail. You know, you walk into a space and people want to play with screens. I actually think that people may step away from that for a little bit in the retail spaces and really want to get hands-on with things in the spaces, touch fabrics, touch Lego bricks, touch slime. So it'll be interesting to see if we see that coming down a bit in terms of creating more screens in spaces.
Maybe I'll follow on that one, taking this from two angles. First of all, I had a chance to speak to our colleagues in China and hear, you know, how everything is going. You know, all Lego stores are now open again in China. And what I'm hearing is that, you know, people are just coming to the stores really anxious or excited, looking forward to live that again. You know, we are all looking back to go to normal, and normal is sometimes the things that you remember the most nostalgic ones. So we actually having a large group of people coming back to regain and that. So I think I personally, this is my personal side, the other side, my hypothesis or my belief is that we're gonna see a large group of people coming at one time just to go back. And then suddenly as humans, we will adapt to that. And of course, many people have had loss, many people have, you know, had difficult times, but this is gonna get us together as humans. And we will, of course, see a larger number of people coming back, and especially, you know, as spring is coming, summer is coming, and hopefully if things fix very fast, we'll be able to see that coming. But there is things that will not change, probably stronger focus on operations, hygiene, and making sure that we have, you know, the right information for everyone in terms of those safety things that will make us feel good if we're going to enter a different environment. But I do have hope that the other side is going to have even a brighter side of the spectrum.
Yeah, and to add on to what Martin's saying, I think the transparency around safety measures and what you're going to be doing to keep everyone healthy will be more important than ever. I also believe that, at least around my product category, around slime and the mental health benefits that people have or starting to experience today, we kept saying, come play with slime to get off your technology. And now we're saying, while you're on your technology, play with slime. It is going to change the dynamic. And I think people are going to be allowed to play while they're on call. Acceptable to be doing something with your hands, even as an adult, in the middle of a meeting, because people understand that we're all really struggling to get through the days.
It does seem to have made everyone more human, doesn't it? What's happened, it's really connected people in that the barriers are down. We're not all keeping to those protocols we might have had before of how we interacted with people, the kind of clothes we wore to meetings, the formalities of things. You see everyone's living room, everyone's kind of got an understanding of where everyone lives and their dog and their kids and their cats and everything. So that human element is hopefully something we're going to see come through. And it feels like almost an editing of some of, you know, 100 years ago, people were wearing bowler hats to work. 50 years ago, people still wore suits. People do dress down Fridays. People work from home in cafes. There's been so much change. And when you think about retail, people are going to appreciate maybe what retail can do that online retail can't, because I think people have experienced now that shopping online is quite a practical thing to do, but whether it can convey the whole experience.
I don't know if you've seen this, Howard, but I mean, in New York City and out here in the Westchester, there's also been a reinvigoration, I feel, of love for local retail. So your local shops, you're like everyone, you know, talking about supporting your local retailers. So I feel like that could be a really interesting shift as well in a new normal as people think about how to support the shops that are around their neighborhood that they realize they don't want to see disappear.
Absolutely, that's an incredible thing. We're doing some research in the studio in London about that at the moment. New community reconnect, and this idea of kind of mass connection on a global scale, where everyone's saying that this is actually a great leveler globally. People are all aligned with one enemy, and politically and socially, the way they're interacting is kind of all for one, one for all. We're all kind of trying to fight this thing. But equally, this idea of like local communities and really connecting with people geographically really close to you, and how we can support businesses, which is why events like this are good to get everyone together, and I'm hoping with everyone in the audience. And another an interesting element has been what altruistic moves we can all do as industry professionals, be it volunteer pro bono work, whether we can use our skills to help in another sector. I don't know if anyone on the panel's had any experience of that, or there's anything, because I know, Lauren, particularly you work in the healthcare environment, and the idea when we spoke before about how health sounds, no more pertinent time than now, and there's going to be a lot of people on ventilators and with beeping noises.
Yeah.
Could you talk about your experience? That was so interesting before.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because it's there is this, many people talk about the sound of healthcare and how it's really agonizing. It's noisy, it's loud, you're on multiple machines. It's not at all the soundtrack that you want to be in when you're trying to get healthy. It's times like this that I think we remember it. I think that the greatest thing that I've seen that organizations are doing are helping to provide mental health to nurses and doctors, because this isn't a problem that's solved, and it's not going to get solved through right now, especially. Everybody, you know, those environments are really crazy. So thinking about the mental health of our nurses and doctors on top of our patients is really critical, giving them a great break, giving them some quiet space. But yeah, it's times like this that really brings that to the forefront of why it's so important to get that solved, which it hasn't been yet.
We have a question from someone in the audience called Christopher Shute, who is asking, who will own the future customer experience? Now that we're fully digital and physical, if everyone owns it, who would we say is in the lead? Whether it's the marketeers, the experience officers, the physical store designers, the web teams. I mean, it's a big ecosystem, and the senses are another part of that metabolism, aren't they? So does anyone have the answer? It's quite an interesting one.
I could take the lead in that one. Actually, for us, it's very interesting because this is actually making all of us work together. And of course, you need to have a responsible to be defined, but it's actually, you know, making all of us work together. And this is maybe linking to the previous question. This is, you know, making a feel about everyone working together, everybody caring, being grateful, and all of that in our side of the business. You know, when we started to work and look into how we're going to evolve the online experience and things like that, is everybody leaning in, everybody putting their efforts. So for us, actually, it's been a cross-functional area that will bring marketing, store operations as well, our .com, our IT team, and looking into how we're going to do that. I mean, all the way from looking into the bandwidth and the servers down to how do we actually, you know, have a message that will mention the right priorities and the right focus on things. So at least for us, until that is defined, we are working together as a group of teams, as a group of individuals, where everybody is leaning in. So I hope that this is not the new normal, and we will all go back to our own, you know, focus and priorities. But not only in the community, also at work, this is bringing people together, and when everyone is just leaning in to make it work.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's almost the new normal is something more empathetic, humanly connected. It's a great learning for all of us, isn't it? That nature is omnipresent and powerful, and we can now, as a community of people, humankind will always try and do its best to do the best for all of us on the planet. So that's a really interesting point. And if we're thinking about how we do power forward, because we've talked a lot about the present and the kind of immediate qualities that we're dealing with, but I'm going to ask you first, Martin, because I think you might have the answer. But if you imagine designing this great big, or not, it might not even be great big, it might be a community store. If you had an absolute blank sheet of paper, new Lego store of the future, you were launching it next year, we could forget about what was happening now, but take the learnings from it, not solely focus on that as the reason for it to be, but like basically blank sheet of paper, new Lego experience, physical retail. What kind of things would excite you about that in the future, say in a year's time?
Wow, that is a big question, Howard. I think, you know, I mean, we are all definitely have the time to look into that answer. I cannot have a full answer completely, but if I could think on areas that we would like to explore further, is how do we create in a physical store a link to the online shop? Again, some retailers are doing great omni-channel kiosk, you know, click and collect, click and ship, all those activities. But is it actually that activity creating a link? I don't think so. I think all of those areas are providing a service, but not really creating a connection. So in my dreams, maybe if you give me more than 1 year and give me a few years and some money, we could to develop that. I think I could imagine a place where physical and digital becomes connected beyond a service. Actually, this is a true connection on experience, on feeling, on customer service, on the way you connect with other people in the other side. I think this is a unique opportunity for us to learn and bring that connection further, because right now, as I say, everybody's doing services, but I cannot really think on something that is completely joined and connected and actually making you feel that you have the same level of experience, doesn't matter where you are. That could be a dream and a vision.
Amazing stuff. Because people talk a lot about bricks and mortar, and I was thinking recently how it's almost like it's the bricks or the clicks. It's always very kind of bipolar, isn't it? It's one or the other. Whereas I was thinking almost the mortar these days of the bricks is that lifeline to the digital, the sensory. The mortar itself is not a physical thing anymore. It's a whole omnipresent neural connection of AI, digital online services. There's physical, there's human. We're all human, and we need that mix of both. I wondered whether Sarah or Laura, you had a big, just as big a question as to Martin. So you've got your blank sheet of paper. I mean, I know, Lauren, in particular, you've done a future soundtrack for an alien life form. So you've already gone way into the future. You're designing Nissan Leaf, future of transport. So what will our cities sound like? Let's hear some future stuff. What's exciting you, or what would get you out of bed next year?
You know, it's funny, but during this time, I think that trend of bringing the outside in isn't going anywhere. And it's what we all find ourselves talking about most, is bringing nature into physical spaces. The biophilics of a natural environment, all of the frequencies, the sounds of insects to the sound of rushing water, and how that makes us feel like an environment is healthy, that it is a healthy and living environment, I think is going to continue to be so important even inside retail spaces. So we're looking forward to exploring that. I think continuing this trend of, if they bring plants in, what sounds come in with it. I think that this experience is going to magnify all of that, and people are going to be looking to bring nature into retail, and we'll be there to support that from a sound perspective.
I can imagine we'll all be in nature a bit more as well, because having had the isolation of being indoors, and some of us have gardens and access to outdoor space, but it feels like that connection with the real world is so much more tantalizing now, isn't it? So synergy. Sarah, I'd love to hear what the new Sloomoo Institute might look like. Have you had any thoughts?
I think there's two, to be brief, but there's two areas that I think we'll start to explore. One is with this humanity, or this focus on humanity, is really taking our frontline staff and our employees who I have never felt closer with, even though they are so far away right now, but allowing them to come to life and be more than ever part of the brand and embodying the experience. I think they'll get a respect that maybe they didn't get before by people coming in, because we're realizing we've all been through this together, right? There's everyone's experienced the same pain. So I think there's this humanizing moment that can then flow over to the retail experience. And I think we will continue to focus on customization. I think what this has really shown us is that people are looking for things that are unique and individual, and we can take the mass experience and start to customize it down so that people are having their own journey.
Thank you very much. It was a little tiny glitch, so I just caught the very end just then. And then a question that's come from the audience, which is quite interesting in light of that as well, this idea of how we've connected now and then how afterwards. Sarah, to you, I mean, have you found that there's been a build of an online community that you see really growing, and that's something that will carry on even when we're back into the physical spaces, this idea of like our online connected communities and the people that we're loyal to and sharing stories with, that will be something to focus on more than we might have done before?
Yeah, I think that online is continuing to grow, and that I've been joking that it's not going to just be these perfect slime videos online anymore. It's going to be everyone's bloopers, right? because everyone's playing and experimenting and having fun, and they're going to be able to reveal a little bit more about themselves that way.
I was amazed in the research to see that there's actually an ASMR university. I never realized that would actually exist.
I didn't know that either.
There really is. University of Brain Tingles. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
So that was a question from Neil Mackenzie. I wondered if, Piers, would you like to step in? Is there anything you'd like to say, or any questions or anything you'd like to add?
It's been super interesting. It's our first session, and just after a couple of weeks of like being distracted by, you know, trying the world's news and then trying not to look at the world's news, it's been great to kind of have this sort of positivity and this focus. So I suggest you kind of, we think about a kind of closing statement and closing thoughts would be great.
Amazing. So I'll start off, and if anyone on the panel wants to chip in, obviously, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone. It's been a really interesting panel. Again, we could carry on the conversation for ages, and hopefully we will physically in New York at some point later on in the year or next year. I think your attitudes and approaches have been really interesting to hear. I think what's been incredible to hear from my perspective is, Sarah, you've been dealing with a product that's very, very, very physical and very tactile and very hands-on, and hearing how that is challenged by the idea of the Sloomoo Institute is not something that can be open physically at this point, but how you've spun and twisted and responded really quickly to how your product is now even more relevant than it might have been before. And I'm sure that's going to feed into the development of your company in the future. Lauren, I think the idea of sound, as you said, this idea of returning to nature, what's been interesting, I think, to hear from you is how all of these incidental, sometimes subconscious sounds that we hear are all slightly wrong or not quite right at the moment. Not every single one of them, not all of them, but they all need to be redressed. And that's the same for us in a lot of industries where the small nuances of what makes a brand experience amazing, we're all working really hard behind the scenes to make those recalibrate and feel fitting for now. And I think there's a lot of learnings for anyone involved in any element of retail design, from sounds to physical design to digital design. And Martin, I'm sorry to put you on the spot and make you design the Lego store of the future in 2 minutes. But it's been great to have your optimism on the call and hear about how Lego is endeavoring to think about the future store as it reopens again, and all of the great stuff that you're doing around learning, around play, around customization, and around really listening to your audience and how people are using Lego. There's lots of homeschooling, and you mentioned on our catch up how Lego's become, it's known as one of the world's most innovative toys. It has so many different functions. So how you're supporting your community at the moment when homeschooling is such a big thing. So if anyone would like to end and add any comments in, that's pretty much me just doing the wrap. I think it's been absolutely brilliant. I've really enjoyed it.
I think maybe, Howard, just leaving a question for everyone to reflect will be, just imagine you haven't seen a good friend for a long time, and you're gonna see him or her after all this period of time. What would you like to tell them? What would you like? How would you like to welcome them? This will be our shoppers coming to our stores hopefully soon. So how do we want to welcome them? What is the message that we want to tell them? I think we need to think in a similar way and prepare for that. Hopefully it will happen very soon.
That is such a brilliant question. And I think we can all leave that just, I mean, unless anyone wants to particularly answer it now, I think it's a really interesting one to leave on, and just leave everyone, I think, who's participated. Thank you everyone for your questions. For everyone in the audience, you've been really engaged and putting lots of messages. I'm sorry I didn't get the chance to ask all of your questions, but
thank you, Howard. Thank you, Howard. Thanks so much for all your help, and thanks to all the panelists, Sarah, Lauren, Martin, and just scrambling to put this together and dealing with the situation. Thanks to everybody who came and joined today. There's so many people who came to over 150 people at one point, so I appreciate it. Thank you. See you on one of the talks, and speak to you soon. Bye.